All right, that now brings us to our first official UFC bout of the evening, and it takes place in the featherweight division as we have tough finalist Con Ofli coming in at plus 165, going up against recent Road to UFC winner Yizha. Now, starting off on the Ofli side of things, he did stumble in his UFC debut against Mohamed Naimov, who kept him on the defensive and showcased a grinding game from the clinch to the takedowns and that top control. But Ofli was in it for most of that fight, just couldn't really get off on much offense of his own. Prior to that, he had actually lost to Myron Santos in the Ultimate Fighter 32 finale. He couldn't deal with the size advantage and the strength of Santos, nor the striking of Santos, which eventually led to Ofli getting knocked out in the second round. But Ofli did showcase his BJJ black belt and grappling skills last time around against Ricardo Ramos, who dove for a knee bar pretty much at the beginning of the fight, and Ofli rolled and showcased good submission defense, eventually worked to a position where he was able to get the back of Ramos, and from there he was quickly threatening with rear naked chokes and eventually found the position to get the choke. He squeezed and got the tap from the UFC veteran. That was big for the confidence of Ofli, who was still looking for his first UFC win at the time, and showcased that he does have potential and why he was so highly touted on the Ultimate Fighter. You know, he beat some pretty tough guys on the Ultimate Fighter, including Nathan Fletcher and even Rudy Roots, who could be in the UFC with the wrestling that he normally brings to the table. Ofli kind of fights like a knockoff Volkanovski in the fact that he throws, maybe not Volkanovski, more of a Chad Mendes, like a short grappling wrestler, a guy that likes to throw a lot of wide winging hooks, but has a good wrestling game, has good BJJ as well. And I think we saw that on display in his last matchup against Ricardo Ramos. Now he's going up against Yizha, who is also a grappler and has a tremendous amount of experience with 31 fights under his belt. But he only needed, 30-something seconds or 20-something seconds to get rid of Weston Wilson last time around. It was hilarious watching him land the overhand left repeatedly, and Wilson had no answer for it. And one of those finally ended up planting Wilson on his ass. Yizha followed up with a lot more big shots and quickly got him out of there. But when you remember that Yizha was a minus 1,200 favorite going into that fight, that's exactly what you're supposed to do, and thankfully he was able to do it. That allowed him to bounce back after his UFC debut loss at the hands of Gabriel Santos, who showed no respect for Yizha. He outstruck him on the feet, he outgrappled him, kept Yizha on his back, especially in deeper water, and showcased his dominance without much issue in return. Yizha is normally a smothering grappler who likes to establish his top control, establish his BJJ, and really keep his opponents on their back, where he often does his best work. He's a mediocre striker at best. I think he seems a little bit lost on the feet unless he sees the openings like he did against Weston Wilson, where he was constantly landing his big shots. But more often than not, we see him shooting takedowns, we see him trying to get that top position, and we see him trying to just grind those positions out. He's finished 20 of those of his 26 wins, with 14 of them coming by submission. So it's obvious what he's obviously looking for in most of his matchups. Now he's going up against Con Ofli here, who will definitely have something to say in the grappling realm. I don't think that Yizha is as aggressive nor dominant of a grappler as Naimov is, so I think we'll see Ofli actually have some success here, shucking off some of the takedowns of Yizha, or even having some success of his own. If Yizha can't have that success, we often see him start to get deterred, start to break a little bit, and I think that's where Ofli can start to have success of his own. On the feet, neither guy, high level, but I feel you can still lean on the aggressiveness and explosivity of Ofli to give him the edge in that realm where he can land some big shots of his own and maybe even mix in some takedowns behind it. I was kind of surprised to see him at plus 165. I'm not sure if that has to do with Yizha's impressive finish last time around, even though he was a minus 1,200 favorite, or if people are still weighing those two losses that Ofli had recently too much in this matchup. I think Ofli is the better, well-rounded fighter here. Yizha could have some success with some of his grappling, but as long as Ofli doesn't get finished early here, I think he can really start to turn the tide of this fight and really have success down the stretch. So I'm going to go Ofli. I think he pulls off the upset here. I think he wins by decision, and I think plus 165 is more than good enough to take a shot on the Turkish Australian fighter. I believe he's Turkish Aussie. Yeah, Turkish Aussie, I guess is what we're going to call him. So give me Ofli by decision.